Big weekend for Labor, a big month, I should say. Joining me on my panel today is Labor MP Michelle Rowland and shortly the Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasurer, Steve Ciobo. Now, Michelle Rowland, first to you. Looking at this leadership ballot, only 12,000 rank and file members voted for Bill Shorten. 1 in 4 didn't vote at all. It's not exactly a huge vote of confidence, is it?
To the contrary, Laura, I think it's very important to recognise that, we actually it was actually a good voter turnout. When you're looking at plebiscites of rank and file members, by and large this was a good one. Bear in mind we've never done this before. I have over 500 branch members in my local area. I keep in touch with a lot of them outside my immediate area as well. And I had a lot of people speaking to me during the ballot process saying we are going to wait until the last debate until we read everything and then we're going to make up our minds. I actually had a couple who live locally and they rang me up and they said, look, we talked about it together, my husband and I talked about it together. Look, we decided to vote for Anthony, but it was very, very close.
This has been talked about as one of the I guess, detractions of this process of electing a leader. The fact that the Parliamentary Party, a resounding result there for Bill Shorten, but still only 12,000 rank and file, 18,000 voted for Anthony Albanese. Do you see that as an issue?
Look, I think it's important to recognise that, look, he got, and some pundits were predicting he would get low to mid-30s in those results. He got 40%, just over 40%. And I think that that's very significant. I also would like to point out that, I haven't had a single branch member, I haven't had a single email from any branch members saying, look, I don't accept this result. Everyone knew the process when they went into it. Albo and Bill both knew it, and the rank and file have really embraced this opportunity.
Now, Steve Ciobo, just on the rank and file, I mean, this hasn't been the huge disaster that the coalition made out that it would be at the beginning of this process. Is there lessons? Are there lessons that the coalition can learn from this process?
Look, Laura, I think you hit the nail on the head. The reality is that backstabbing Bill Shorten is the guy that 18,000 Labor members didn't want. I mean, this is the bloke who the vast majority of the rank and file Labor Party membership said, we don't want this guy to be leader. And what do the caucus do? The Labor Party caucus say, we don't care what the rank and file members of the party want. We're going to instill this guy because that's part of some kind of factional deal that's been done between the Labor members of the Parliament. And this really just illustrates the massive disconnect that exists between the Labor Party parliamentary wing and what's happening with the grassroots Labor Party membership. And it's no different, frankly, to when the Labor Party membership was saying, we don't want Julia, we want Kevin. And the Labor Party MPs kept saying, no, we don't care, we know better, we're going to stick with Julia. And now they've done it again. So, I mean, really, how many more chances do they need?
All right, I want to look at a bit of policy, Michelle, let you respond to that as well. But on the carbon tax, Bill Shorten has confirmed that, the Labor Party as a bloc will stand in the way of Tony Abbott repealing the carbon tax. Now, does this mean that you'll go to the next election promising a carbon tax once again?
Look, all these policy issues have to be worked through. I mean, we're in opposition now, obviously a new leadership team, and we'll need to, obviously consult with one another as a caucus and also with our rank and file. But I think the most important thing to note is, I mean, Labor went to the election, the 2007, 2010 and 2013 election saying we support a price on carbon because we believe climate change is real. Before this election also, we said that we were going to bring forward the fixed price on carbon, that date ending. So that's something that, I can't see us not supporting that. We actually, that's actually something we said we do.
But I mean, you're in the heartland of Western Sydney. You fought a strong fight in your seat. Was the carbon tax toxic? I mean, in the end, it was toxic for the last term, it would seem. Can you really go to the next election promising a carbon tax, or would you have to go promising to go straight to an ETS?
Look, as I said, all these things have to be worked out, but I think there's one thing that we're very clear on, and Bill's been very clear on, is that we support a market mechanism for putting a price on carbon. And we actually proposed that we actually end that fixed term of the fixed price earlier. I mean, and what's the alternative, Laura? I mean, the alternative is this policy that no one's actually been able to explain clearly, this direct action policy. Haven't found one economist that backs it in, haven't found one scientist that really backs it in and says that it's going to work. So, I mean, the Liberal Party have to decide whether or not they actually believe climate change is real, whether they believe their targets are real, and how they're going to end up meeting that. And I think that all these things are things that we're going to discuss very openly.
Okay, Steve Ciobo, will the government maintain its commitment then to going to a double dissolution? You've pledged to take immediate action on this.
Sure. Well, look, we've made it very clear that we believe the Australian people voted emphatically, Laura, to back in the coalition. I mean, there's one fundamental issue here, and I heard you asking Michelle, you know, was this toxic in the electorate? You know, to me, the politics of this don't matter as much as the effectiveness of the policy. And the reality is this, Laura, Labor's policy actually delivered nothing to Australia. It made us less competitive, it drove unemployment higher, and it wasn't achieving an environmental outcome. And so for those reasons, we indicated that we were going to abolish Labor's carbon tax, and bear in mind and never lose sight of the fact, Laura, that Labor introduced the world's biggest carbon tax off the back of a lie. So we are resolute in our determination to say we will abolish this carbon tax, and Labor should get on board because the clear majority of the Australian people
Steve Ciobo,
want
they've
this
made it very
useless
clear
tax gone.
today, and Bill Shorten has made it very clear that they're not going to do that. They're not going to get on board.
Sure.
So therefore, do you have to go to a double dissolution?
Well, they're just not listening. I mean, they're not listening to the Australian people. So we've indicated we will go to a double dissolution, and we'll get the Australian people to have their say for a second time, because the Australian people do not want this toxic tax. They know it was introduced on a lie. They know it does nothing for the environment whatsoever, and it just means that our Australian industries are less competitive and that unemployment gets pushed up. So if Labor wants to back that in, let them do it every day of the week. We'll be happy to go back to the Australian people so they can have their say.
Michelle Rowland, I'll let you respond to that as well, but couldn't the government just wait until the new Senate's ushered in and they can do this anyway?
Well, they could do that, but firstly I'd like to address some of the points that Steve's raised. I mean, he's talking in slogans. He needs to realise he's in government now. And I'd like to belatedly congratulate Steve on his elevation to Parliamentary Secretary. But you know, Steve is saying it delivered no environmental benefits. You know, emissions actually dropped, you know, as a result of putting a price on carbon. We were told that there were going to be these unimaginable price increases. They didn't happen. We were told that this was the world. No one else in the world were doing this. This was the world's biggest carbon tax. We've seen countries around the world. We've seen the International Climate Commission report saying that a market-based mechanism is the way to go. So I would suggest, you know, that Steve's in government now. He needs to stop talking in slogans and start talking like a government.
Okay, just quickly on a caucus meeting today, I talked about the obvious appointments: Tanya Plibersek, Chris Bowen, Tony Burke. Are there any other obvious appointments you think in line for a front bench position? Are you looking for a promotion, perhaps into parliamentary secretary?
I've never been through this process before, but you know, I think we had some very talented people who were ministers when we were in government, and you know, there's a great deal of knowledge that they have of their portfolios that I'm sure will be recognised by the caucus and be put to good use. Look, as for myself, I mean, my first priority is to the people of Greenway. I'm just so honoured to be back here, and there's a lot of fights that I have to have on their behalf. We've only just recently, in the last 24 hours, had it announced that some significant crime prevention funding looks like being taken out of Blacktown, which is very significant for my local community. So they're the fights that I need to be making first and foremost before anything else.
Okay, Steve Ciobo, I just want to ask you about Quentin Bryce, the Governor-General, offering her resignation yesterday as well. Tony Abbott didn't accept it. That was the right path to go down?
Look, I think it was, and you know, I applaud the Governor-General. She continues to send a level of excellence in terms of her service to the interests of the Australian people. I think it was the right thing to do, and look, with the appointment finishing in March next year, it was the right decision by the Prime Minister.
Steve Ciobo, Michelle Rowland, we are going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment.
Thanks.
This isn't just a classroom, because it's much more than papers, pens, desks and diagrams. This classroom is really in a classroom. This is science shared. The best teaching the brightest, using brilliant machines to empower local industry to compete on a global scale. Because our most valued resource isn't our technology or even the resource itself, it's our people.
The all-new Lexus IS is everything.
Kids have loved Milo for years, but just how nutritious is it? You might be surprised. Milo contains 7 key vitamins and minerals like calcium for strong bones and iron, vitamin C and B vitamins to help unlock and use energy. Plus, a glass of Milo and milk is protein-rich and low GI, with 25% less total sugars than a tub of low-fat vanilla yoghurt. Pick up your Milo in-store now. Brand power. Join the club now.
Ever since I was a young boy, I wanted to experience everything life has to offer. So I started on my bucket list. I chased all my dreams with Expedia.
Do you need some help?
Try new raspberry M&Ms today.
When something happens out of the blue, whether it's at home or at work, you need a good lawyer and one you can trust. And that's when you call 1800 555 777. Slater and Gordon. Not a problem.
Australia, you want great value Aussie beef? Well, you've got it at Coles. Like Coles beef rump, down, down and down again at just $13.50 a kilo. Coles beef 3-star mince, down, down and staying down at just $3 for 500 grams.
With no added hormones.
And Coles beef barbecue sausages, down, down and staying down at $7 for 1.7 kilos. Coles, where the price of beef is down, down and staying down.
Look at all the hotels. Hotels in trees, themed hotels. And now they're up to 40% off. Like this hotel. And this one. It's our global sale. No, not 40% off globes. Up to 40% off hotels. It's out of this world. It's still actually in this world.
Welcome back to the program. On my panel, Michelle Rowland and Steve Ciobo. Now, Steve Ciobo, just before the break, Michelle Rowland mentioned this report in the newspaper over the weekend that money from the proceeds of crime that usually goes into a crime prevention strategy, this was a policy under Labor, is now being put on hold. What can you tell us about that, and where should this money be going if it's not going back into crime prevention?
You know, I find it incredible, Laura, that the Labor Party would be critical of what's happening. I mean, the reality is this. Under the former coalition government, I'm talking about before Labor was elected back in 2007, we had a program called the National Community Crime Prevention Program, which saw the rollout across the Australian community of crime prevention funding and crime prevention projects. And guess what? Labor scrapped that program. And only in the final year, in 2013, did Labor suddenly re-find the importance of putting money into crime prevention. Now, the Coalition has reinstated crime prevention program funding. We've done it across Australia. I had $250,000 in my electorate announced prior to the election, and so we're rolling that out across the country again. So frankly, I think Labor needs to stop being pretenders and start being serious about what they can do to address crime.
Okay, I just wanted to quickly ask you as well, the Treasurer, Joe Hockey, was on Sky News yesterday. He flagged federal spending caps. Now, yes, he's also flagged fiscal rules to force ministers to scale back outlays. Now, this sounds like an efficiency dividend for ministers. Is that what it is?
No, what it's about is about getting spending under control. We know that under the Labor Party over the last 6 years when they were in government, we saw spending just growing rampantly. We saw wasted billions of dollars of programs, and what the Coalition is about is getting spending under control. We want to install strong fiscal discipline across the whole of government. This is absolutely fundamental to getting Australia credibly back on the pathway to returning to surplus because, Laura, at the end of the day, let's not forget, only 12 months ago, Labor said they were going to deliver a $1.5 billion surplus, and what do? They delivered a $30.1 billion deficit. And so that's the reason why we make no apologies for the fact that we're going to get spending under control, we're going to have fiscal restraint, and we're going to do it in a way that's fair to the Australian people, but also doesn't ensure future generations of Australians.
Do you still think this coalition government can deliver a surplus earlier than the timeline Labor set out?
I have absolutely no doubt that the Coalition has better fiscal discipline than the Labor Party does. No doubt whatsoever.
All right, I just wanted to, Michelle, touch on some of Joe Hockey's points yesterday as well. He said a limit on tax collections. He wants to set a limit on tax collections as a proportion of the economy, set at 23.7%, and also relook at a Labor policy that was to limit real spending growth to 2% a year. Now, this is something that the previous Labor government didn't find easy, but you still think it should be pursued, no doubt?
Well, look, I think the important point to make is that we're getting very mixed messages from what Joe Hockey and this government says it wants to do on finances. I mean, firstly, they say the age of entitlement is over, and then we see, quite reckless spending happening at the moment, and also quite, what I would actually think is wrong priorities in terms of where cuts are being proposed, contrary to what everything Steve has said about crime prevention strategies. But also Joe Hockey talking about we need to borrow to invest in infrastructure, we need to generate more money this way. So it is very confusing to actually figure out what their strategy on this is going to be. And let's remember too, we're talking about the debt ceiling. Andrew Robb said, a government that needs us to raise its debt ceiling, it just shows incompetence. Well, Joe Hockey's talking about raising the debt ceiling now. So what does that say about their strategy?
All right, Steve Ciobo, your response to that, but also I wanted to touch on what Michelle just said about privatisation. There's a report in the Australian Financial Review today that the coalition government will aggressively push the states to privatise infrastructure assets. Now, Anna Bligh might tell you that that's a risky move, particularly in your home state of Queensland.
Well, can I just address that point that Michelle raised where she said, we're raising the debt ceiling? I mean, for goodness sake, this is the Labor Party and Wayne Swan when he was Treasurer who said, we're going to have the debt limit at $300 billion and, and we'll deal with it later on. The government's own forecasts under Labor was for debt to reach $370 billion. And now Michelle's trying to make out that we're the ones who have the spending problem. I mean, this is why Labor cannot be, taken seriously. You have forecast debt of $370 billion, you raise the limit to $300 billion, and then you criticise the coalition for having to raise it to take into account all of your spending.
This was the guy who criticised us.
Get serious. Get serious.
You start acting serious, Steve.
Well, Michelle, I am not going to tolerate for 1 second a Labor Party politician having a go at a coalition member because we need to increase the debt ceiling because you guys spent like drunken sailors. I mean, you're the ones who have got us going to $370 billion.
Can we get to the privatisation issue, please?
Sure. Well, look, on privatisation, federally, Laura, we've indicated that Medibank Private is the only issue that we're looking at, or the only agency we're looking at privatising. Now, ultimately, what state governments do is going to be the decision of state governments. It's not a decision that the federal government can impose. State governments will look at their assets. They'll make a decision about whether or not taxpayers are better off to continue, in some instances, propping up inefficient state government agencies.
OK, I just want to quickly get Michelle Rowland's response to this. Sorry, only 30 seconds on the program. Now, Paul Howes has indicated that Labor shouldn't be as opposed to large-scale privatisation. Do you agree?
Well, look, Labor was involved when we were in government in privatisations, but what we looked at is whether it was for the public good. We looked at a range of factors to determine whether or not it was something that should be pursued not purely on ideology, but for the public good. That's why we opposed the sale of Telstra in our first term in opposition after '96. OK,
Michelle Rowland, Steve Ciobo, it's been a pleasure. That is it for this half hour of AM Agenda. We will be back after the break with more news and the latest on the New South Wales bushfire situation.